who is the better dynasty wide receiver right now between Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Zay Flowers? Both of these guys, they had their up and down moments, but both of them are obviously very talented and came in as very good prospects. Because on one hand, you've got Jaxon Smith-Njigba. This guy, in my opinion, was a better prospect, but he had a worse quarterback this year, and obviously on the level of Zay Flowers, not quite there as far as his fantasy season was in 2023. And then Zay Flowers, on the other hand, better quarterback obviously with Lamar, but actually lower passing volume to work with. So is his ceiling capped compared to Jaxon Smith-Njigba's long term? That's what we're discussing today. Who I prefer in Dynasty Fantasy Football and who you should prefer as well. And this is a new channel exclusively for Dynasty Fantasy Football. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you get value from this video today. Let's go ahead and just dive into this. So I want to isolate Jaxon Smith-Njigba first and foremost right here. So the first thing that I want to do in this particular video is provide you guys exactly how he graded out in my wide receiver prospect model. When he was a rookie, this is a very important step for me when I'm evaluating wide receivers in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So there's four main things for me that, as I have been developing this prospect model for over a decade at this point in fantasy football, these are the four most important factors that translate to NFL success, specifically in fantasy football. I've hit on some big guys that were later round to mid-round guys over the years. Jaden Reed, Tank Dell, they all graded out really well in the prospect model. So the first thing I'm looking at here is what was the breakout year? This is going to show me how early this player was a capable contributor on the offense. Not just capable though. We're seeing how well he was able to handle college competition at a younger or older age. The earlier, the better on this metric as well, because that translates to earlier breakouts in the NFL as well. He had a sophomore breakout year. That was the year that he went nuclear with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave in the same building. So Garrett Wilson was just not on the level of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Chris Olave was not on the level of Jaxon Smith-Njigba at Ohio State in Jaxon Smith-Njigba's sophomore season. Sophomore breakout grade, that's an A for me. Film breakdown grade is the next thing. This is the most important piece of the entire puzzle right here. The most important, because I can tell you what I'm looking for in the film breakdown. I am looking for how many layers a receiver has in their game and what kind of a route tree they run. So if I can get a wide receiver who is consistently separating over the middle with pure footwork and with great handwork. If you're going over the middle and going outside, going deep, going shallow, you're going to have a very good prospect grade. If you're just a deep threat, those guys aren't graded out as well because they don't translate as well to the NFL. See guys like Jameson Williams, guys like Henry Ruggs, guys like Quentin Johnston, how they have done so far in their careers. Jaxon Smith-Njigba got an A grade for me. This guy can separate like nobody else. He's excellent at it. He's Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown level. Not the fastest guy on the field. Quickness though, separation skills, absolutely top tier right here. This guy could do a lot of different things in college, and we saw that, especially towards the end of his rookie season in Seattle. Now, this is a big one for me because film breakdown, I'm studying the film of as many wide receivers in this year's class as I can on Patreon. So if you want to come watch some film with me, join the Patreon. The link is in the comments below. Now, the biggest one to me, outside of film breakdown grade, it could be the target share. The target share is a big one for me. Now, what I like to do is I like to isolate it for the last season in college football. Now, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, it wasn't great. It was a 22.7% target share. That's a B grade for me. Not great, not bad. Like that shows me that he was still very involved in this offense, and he carved out a role, like I said, with guys like Garrett Wilson, with guys like Chris Olave in the same building that were all in their junior or senior years in Ohio State. So Jaxon Smith-Njigba carved out a role for himself in this offense. And then draft capital is important as well. This determines how short or long of a leash a player is going to have at the NFL level. And of course, JSN was a first-round draft pick. So let's look at what he did in his rookie season. You can see the numbers on the screen on a per-game basis, what he was doing. So honestly, they don't really embody what he ended up doing. towards the back half of the season. Like the first half of the season, it was a big disappointment. He was not involved barely at all on this offense. Like they were using a lot of 11 personnel again, like we were used to before the Seahawks drafted him. And that was a lot of people's concerns when he went to Seattle. It didn't exactly end that way. He ended the year with 93 targets, didn't miss a game. And keep in mind, he injured his wrist before the season started. 4 touchdowns at the end of the year. Not a terrible year, and especially not a bad finish, but definitely not what I was looking for. 628 total yards. He's better than that. It's a little underwhelming. Like, let's be honest here. It was an underwhelming rookie year. Now, this is the thing I like, is that the new head coach, Mike Macdonald, he's coming from Baltimore. He's a defensive guy. I don't love that. What I do like is that he's non-committal right now on Geno Smith. As of the time of this filming, which is Sunday night on March 10th. I want them to move off Geno so bad. Geno is not going to be able to support Jaxon Smith-Njigba and DK Metcalf. And Tyler Lockett, for that matter, who looks to be staying in Seattle as of right now. They need another quarterback. And there's a good chance they get a new quarterback through the draft. And that's exactly what I want them to do. So really, I love the player he is. I think he should finish better this year in fantasy, regardless of if they get a better quarterback or not. But in my opinion, for him to really reach his true potential, a quarterback upgrade is absolutely necessary. Now, let's look at Zay Flowers now. Let's go through the prospect model again. Now, Zay Flowers grades out really well for me as well. His college breakout year, sophomore year. A grade for me, basically the same as Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Film breakdown grade, wasn't as impressed. Now, I was still impressed, but he got a B+ grade. He wasn't as consistently used down the field as I would have liked. And a lot of that, I remember watching film at the time, recognizing how bad Boston College's quarterback was, because that's where Zay Flowers came from. Their quarterback was bad, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because I knew with the ball in his hands, this guy was extremely good. And of course, it translated immediately for Zay Flowers, because you saw lots of that in his first year, taking the ball on a wide receiver screen, a little short crossing route. Zay Flowers is lethal with the ball in his hands. That's what gave him a B+ grade. Now, his college target share, that was the most impressive. And this followed him to the NFL. 29.6% target share. A+. This guy was everything to Boston College. And really, he was clearly the number one player, the number one target, the number one option in that Baltimore offense year one. I don't care what Harbaugh says about Rashad Bateman coming into his 4th year now, about how he's going to have a big year. I don't care about that. It's Zay Flowers. This is the guy. And obviously, first round draft capital in the NFL draft. So his rookie season, you can see the numbers per game basis on the screen right now. It was up and down as well. Similar to Jaxon Smith-Njigba's, except there was more big games from Zay Flowers than there were with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Now again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was the undisputed number one. Odell had his games where he was the wide receiver one. Rashad Bateman, in fact, towards the end of the season, actually had some decent games as well. But consistently, Zay Flowers was the guy. So that led to more bigger boom games, 20, 25-point games that Jaxon Smith-Njigba had. So he was better in fantasy than Jaxon Smith-Njigba was, obviously. And he had those few games late that were really big as well. And obviously, he's just got a more steady, stable quarterback with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, there's no question about whether or not Baltimore's getting a new quarterback or not. Lamar Jackson is their guy, at least for the next 4 or 5 seasons. But I want to look at something. This is been discussed throughout Lamar's career, and it's 100% true. A wide receiver, a pass-catching option in Baltimore, the fantasy football pie just isn't as big. So Mark Andrews for a long time dominated that receiving core, not corpse. He dominated the receiving core as the tight end, even when they had Marquise Brown. Well, why is that? Well, it's because he was the target, and basically the rest was just kind of like scraps. Maybe you could put together a 700-yard season. Is it the same thing? Well, let's look back at last year. So let's look at Seattle's quarterbacks. Seattle's quarterbacks between Geno Smith and Drew Lock, 575 total pass attempts. That's towards the top of the league. That's a lot of passing attempts for a wide receiver. Bigger pie for Jaxon Smith-Njigba, 100%. Baltimore, almost 100 less passing attempts. Lamar Jackson had 457, and Tyler Huntley had 37. 494. That's just a much smaller fantasy football pie. That's a lot less, man. So, again, my argument with Jaxon Smith-Njigba is if he gets a better quarterback, then it's going to be better for him, and I think he's going to be more involved regardless. So what if Zay Flowers has the same deal? He's still the wide receiver 1, but this is his ceiling right here. It's not as good as a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba's is. So this has always been the case with Lamar. Literally ever since he was a rookie in this league. Ceiling is capped. The ceiling here is capped. I love this player as well. I really like Zay Flowers. I think he's more versatile than Jaxon Smith-Njigba is. I think he has more ways to get bigger games than Jaxon Smith does. But how much higher is the ceiling? I don't think it's much higher, and I don't think it is. I'll go with Jaxon Smith-Njigba in Dynasty Fantasy Football over Zay Flowers because I like his ceiling with that amount of passing volume. And if they get a quarterback upgrade over Lamar Jackson, who is the quarterback, you're not going to see Lamar start throwing 530 plus passing attempt seasons. That's just not in Lamar Jackson's DNA. He's had 2 MVP seasons now doing the same exact thing. Throwing less, more efficient. That's all good and dandy. But for a guy like Zay Flowers, the ceiling is capped here with less volume. And that's why I like Jaxon Smith-Njigba better than I like Zay Flowers in Dynasty Fantasy Football. As always, let me know what you think about these two guys and who you prefer in Dynasty Fantasy Football in the comments below. And make sure you stay on the lookout for my 2024 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, which is going to help you get the best players and best values in your Dynasty Rookie drafts.